On my birthday, I got a message from my dead grandfather. Inside was a single line that made my whole family go pale. I turned 30 on a Thursday, and by noon I already knew nobody in my family remembered my birthday. Not my mom, not my sister Emily, not my uncle Rick, who somehow remembered every football score from the 80s, but never remembered to call unless he needed something. I spent the day at work pretending it didn't bother me. Around 6, I grabbed takeout and went home to my apartment. Quiet night, fine by me. At 8:14 p.m., my phone buzzed. The contact name made my stomach drop. Grandpa Walter. I stared at the screen so long it dimmed. My grandfather had been dead for 8 months. I actually replayed the funeral in my head like maybe I'd imagined it somehow. But no, I carried his casket with my cousin Nate. I watched them lower him into the ground myself. The text was one sentence. They lied to you about the lake house. That was it. No explanation. No follow-up. The lake house had already caused problems in the family after Grandpa died. According to my mom and Uncle Rick, Grandpa left it equally to both of them before they sold it to a developer for around $680,000. I never questioned it much because honestly, I'd spent most of my life being invisible in that family. Emily got help paying for college. I got loans. Emily got a car at 17. I got Grandpa's old toolbox and a handshake. But when Grandpa got sick, suddenly everybody needed me. I was the one driving him to chemo because I lived closest. I fixed things around his house. I sat with him during long nights while everyone else posted emotional tributes online, pretending they were involved. And Grandpa noticed. One night, about a month before he died, we were sitting on his porch eating cheap pizza when he asked me one question. You still talk to your father? I said no. He nodded once. Good, that was Grandpa. Now I was staring at a message sent from his disconnected phone. I called immediately. Number unavailable. I texted back anyway. What do you mean? Nothing came back. The next morning, I casually called my mom and asked about the lake house sale. The silence on the line lasted too long. Why are you asking about that now? I was just curious. Your grandfather's lawyer handled it. Who was the lawyer? Another pause. I don't remember. That's when I knew something was wrong. Grandpa kept records of everything. Receipts from 20 years ago. Tax documents organized in labeled folders. There was no chance he died without detailed paperwork. So I drove out to the lake house, or what used to be the lake house. Half the place was already demolished. Grandpa's porch swing sat broken beside a dumpster. One of the contractors mentioned construction had been delayed because of ownership disputes involving one of the heirs. One heir, not two. I drove straight to the county records office after that. $20 later, I sat in my truck staring at property documents with shaking hands. Grandpa left the lake house entirely to me. Not mom, not Rick, me. Attached to the paperwork was a handwritten note for Caleb because he showed up. I sat there gripping the papers while cars moved through the parking lot around me. Then I noticed something worse. The sale authorization had my signature on it, except it wasn't mine. It was Emily's handwriting trying to imitate mine. I recognized it immediately because she still made her lowercase e the same strange way she did in high school. I called the attorney listed on the documents. Real office, real lawyer. The second I introduced myself, his tone changed. Systems, you were aware of the arrangement. Long silence. Finally he sighed. Your mother said you agreed to privately sell your share to the family. What share? Another silence. Then quietly, the property belonged entirely to you. That afternoon I requested everything. Emails, bank transfers. By the weekend I understood the whole thing. Mom and Uncle Rick hid the real will. Emily forged my signature. Then they sold the property and split the money between themselves. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was realizing they sat across from me at Thanksgiving, pretending everything was normal while knowing exactly what they'd done. I didn't confront them immediately. I hired a lawyer first. Then I waited. 2 weeks later, Mom invited everyone over for dinner because Emily's husband was supposedly stressed about losing his job. I showed up carrying a folder. Nobody looked nervous at first. Then I placed copies of the forged documents beside the mashed potato. Emily went pale instantly. Uncle Rick stopped chewing. Mom stared at the papers and whispered, "Where did you get those?" I didn't answer. I slid another paper across the table. The lawsuit, fraud, forgery, estate concealment, filed that morning. Emily immediately blamed Rick. Rick blamed Mom. Mom kept repeating they were protecting the family like those words fixed anything. I sat quietly while they turned on each other for almost 20 minutes. Finally, Mom looked at me and asked, "Are you really doing this to us?" I looked over at Emily. Funny, I said. That's exactly what Grandpa wrote in his notes. Nobody spoke after that. Not when I stood up. Not when I walked to the door. Not even when I dropped Grandpa's old lake house key onto the table beside the lawsuit papers. The only sound left in the room was Uncle Rick breathing too hard. And for the first time in my life, nobody asked me to stay.